Okay, so I apologize for the late start. I lost track of time. But we're going to continue today working to create sections in SketchUp. We've already done plans, and essentially what we're doing is very, very similar to what we did in plans, only this time we're going to try to do it as a section. And I'm going to switch back into a kind of a perspective view. And one of the important things to understand about sections is they're probably one of the more valuable architectural drawings that we can do because it's a representation of what or how we experience space. Right? So if I'm standing here looking at this room, I'm not looking at the room in plan. Plan's just an organizational tool. I'm looking at it in section. How tall the ceiling is, right? How big the room is. That all has to do with section. And so when we create our sections, we want to think about what showcases our room in the best manner. And so we're going to use the same set of tools that we used last class to create the plan. The difference here is that when we cut the section, we're obviously going to be in the X or the Y direction, or some variant of that. And so when I click on, and again I have the same model here that I've been working with, when I click on the section tool, right, instead of looking with the section pointing down like we did last time, I'm going to use it pointing to the side, for example. And so if I was here, right, and I clicked, it would create a section, which if I zoom out, we can see that little section marker there. And if I were to select it and then use the move tool, right, I can move this section backwards and forwards through the building. And that's something that's relatively convenient in the world of SketchUp because we can kind of decide, where's the right place to cut this particular section as part of my building. Right? What part of the building do I want to see, etc. And so because of the nature of my building and because of the fact that I'm missing some of the windows on the back side and whatever, I have to decide what is the appropriate place to be taking a particular section. Do I want to cut through these two bedrooms? Do I want to cut through, say, this living room, etc.? I have to kind of figure that out. What I did this morning was I did a section that was facing this way. And I think for you guys, I'm going to do a section facing the opposite way, just so we can see two different things in terms of what's happening. And so when I get this section figured out, right, I've cut through those windows, which is nice, and I'm going to be looking into that doorway there. When I get this set up and I look at it, you notice that I still have a receding vanishing point that's coming to the center here. I don't want to have that anymore, so I want to change my projection from perspective into parallel projection. Right? And when I do that, because I'm still not in one of my standard views, I still get a little bit of a weird looking result. So let me go into my view or camera, standard views, and I'm going to pick, it's either going to be the right or the left. And I don't remember which one it is. It's not the right. Let's try the left. There we go. And now I can actually see myself cutting through this particular building. The place with the darker line is obviously what I've cut through. This with the lighter line is what's kind of in the background of my particular image. Okay? So once I have this set up, I want to zoom it in, right, so that I'm seeing this particular drawing about like that. And once again, I've started under my default styles with the hidden line mode as my style. And then let's go ahead and save this particular view. So I'm going to click on the plus sign here, and I will call this section 02 because I have section 01 from this morning. And let's make these go away here. We'll call this section 02. And it didn't take. Hold on. Section 02. There it is. And now I can come back to this view in the future. But I want to make sure that a few things are off. I'm going to go to the View menu and make sure that Section Planes is off, which it is. I'm going to make sure that my axes are off. And I'm also going to make sure that my guides are off before I do any exports. Right? So this should be very repetitive. We've now done it, I think, 4 times. So the steps should be very, very easy to remember by now. So now that I have this established, I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Export 2D Graphic. And I'm going to save this onto my flash drive. Let's get to today's folder. Oh, I need to create one here. Exercise 129. And this is going to be spring of 2016. And we'll go ahead and save this as section 02 underscore lines. There we go. And I'll go ahead and check on my options. I have it currently set to 4,000 wide by 2,000 tall. That's fine. And I'll go ahead and export. Oops, let me say OK, and then export. And now I'm going to go through the same process that I've been going through. The next one would be to turn on the X-ray mode. So I'm going to go to Edit in my styles, and I'm going to click the box for X-ray. And when I do that, right, I see a little bit more information. I'll go ahead and export this as well. So I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And I'll call this X-ray. And I'll export. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn on the shadow. So I'll turn off the X-ray. I'm going to turn on the shadows. And in this particular context, one of the things to be aware of is that SketchUp likes to cut holes. When you cut a section, it will let the sun in through that section. So the only valuable shadows are ones that are being cast that aren't inside the building. So this shadow here with this big box, right, that's being cut through the big opening that I created when I cut the section to begin with. So that's not particularly valuable. These pieces are light coming through my windows, but the light would only be coming out from my building if this hole was open on the side. So these, again, aren't particularly valuable. This is being cast by something that's on my deck, right, in the middle of the view. So that particular shadow is valuable because it's on the elevation of the building. So we'll go ahead and we'll save this as a shadow. But before I do that, I want to turn off my edges. So I'm going to come over to Edit. I'm going to turn off my edges so that we have those gone. And then I'll go ahead and go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And we'll call this Shadows. And by the way, the black border of what I've cut through here isn't going to go away. So I'm going to have to leave that there when I do this export, even though I try to turn everything else off. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to View. We'll turn off the shadows. And then I'll move on to some of my other styles. So you guys know that I like, under Sketchy Edges, to use the airbrush with endpoints. There. But I have to go back to View and turn off the section plane, and then turn off the guides. And then I'll go ahead and go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And I'll call this Airbrush. And we'll export that. And then I'll also use the pen gray. And of course, you're welcome to choose any other options that work for you. But these are the ones that I found successful. And I'll go ahead and go back and once again turn off my section planes. My axes are off, but I want to turn off my guides. And then I'll export this view as well. So File, Export, 2D Graphic. And this is now the pen gray. And then I'll export. So this process is very similar to everything that we've been doing over and over again. So I didn't dwell on it too long because I'm assuming that you can do this by this point in the semester. So now it's a matter of moving over into the world of Photoshop and bringing these pieces in just like we've been doing. So I'll go ahead and go to File and then Open. And I'm going to go ahead and open up. Hold on a second. The lines drawing, which is right here. And we'll go ahead and open it. There it is. And then I'll go to File and then Place, and I'll bring in the rest of these. So we'll put in the airbrush. We'll go to File and then Place, and we'll put in the pen gray. And I'll go to File and then Place, and I'll put in the shadow. And I'll go to File and then Place, and I'll put in the X-ray. So I have all of these that have been placed in. I'm going to rename the layers and change each of the blending modes to be multiply. So we'll go through and make each of these multiply. There we go. And this last one, I'm going to right-click and say Layer from Background, and I can rename it to be Lines, just so it's an active layer and I can actually work with that layer. So let's rename. This is Airbrush. This is Pen Gray. This is Shadows. And this one is X-Ray. There we go. So I have each of those renamed. And let's start with just the basic lines version. And one of the important things about a section is that oftentimes we fill in the walls that we've cut through. So they end up appearing dark. And so I'm going to start with that as part of this overall strategy. So I'm going to go ahead and use my magic wand tool. And I'm going to select inside of the walls. So now I'm inside the walls. But I'm going to do a little bit of work to deselect part of this interior. I should have drawn the back half of this window, which I haven't drawn. So I'm going to manipulate it in the world of Photoshop. So I'll use the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to hold down Alt to subtract from the selection. And I'm going to subtract a little bit of the windows so that they're thinner, about like that. Okay? So I have that little selection made. Let me zoom out here. And I'm going to create a new layer. I'll come down here. New layer. Let's rename that layer to be Wall Fill or Section Fill or whatever seems appropriate to you. And on that Wall Fill layer, I'm going to go ahead and paint with black. Now I could choose to paint this in white. I could choose to paint it in gray. It's a matter of what feels right for your particular drawing. In the case of this, I think black works pretty well. So we'll go ahead and paint this in as black. It looks like I missed a little bit down here that isn't getting filled in. So let me go back to the rectangular marquee. And I'm going to hold down Shift and add to the selection. And actually, let me use my magic wand and select this particular piece. Right there. And so let me Control minus, and we'll go ahead and paint that piece in as well. There it is. Paint it in. And so now I have a wall fill layer that's filled in what I've cut through, right? Which is important in this stage so that I can see what's been cut through. This little piece here is part of the elevation. That's why I didn't fill that in. Likewise, this is part of the elevation, and that's part of the elevation. So the next piece of this is to start to fill in where the ground would be. Right? So before I'm doing anything else, I'm working on what's been cut through and where the ground is going to go. So by default, I can certainly create a flat ground that would be directly below my building. Say it's something like that. We can create a layer. And I'm actually going to put this layer all the way at the very top of the layer stack. And I'm going to call this ground. And then I can go ahead and paint in with the black brush again the ground. So you can see that I've already kind of transformed this into being a nice section cut. Right? I'm establishing this is where the ground is. This is what I've cut through. I've made it black so it stands out against the rest of what I'm seeing in this particular view. But the truth of this particular model is that the ground isn't flat. It's not on a city street. It has some topography to it, and I need to put that topography as part of this. So I'm going to work on the back edge here, which is going to have a hill that's an upslope. Let me zoom in a bit, and we'll come over here. And I'm going to use the regular lasso tool, and I'm going to use that to start here in about the middle, and I'm going to draw a gentle hill going up about like that. And I'll come around until they cross, and then I'll use my paintbrush and again fill that in there to represent that side of the hill. Now I'll come over to this side, and it's a little bit different. I know that I have a little bit that's going to be coming down, and so maybe I'll just use the paintbrush a little bit smaller, and let's make it a hard brush. Oops. Maybe like this. Like that. And then maybe I need to use the eraser to start to make this go down a little bit further. So I'll use the eraser tool right here. Let's make our brush a little bit bigger. I can make this start to go down like that. So now if I press Control 0, we can see that this starts to feel like it's part of a natural slope. Right? This fits within the context of the ground. If this were a very dirt or rocky soil, I might leave it like this. But I'm ultimately going to be putting this where there's some grass. So I'll go ahead and I'll use the grass brush, which we've done before. Using Clone Stamp, I'll pick the grass brush, which is right here, number 134 here. And I'm going to drop the size down to about 60 pixels, which seems to be the right size for what I'm trying to do. And I'll hold down Alt, click to copy from right there, and we'll work some grass. Oops. Sorry. There we go. We'll work some grass in here. And for some reason, it's working very slowly for me. Apparently you are. Let's see. Come on. One. All right, so it takes a little bit of time, and I'm just going to push through, keep adding my grass. Now, if I get to the end here, you see how I can't go past? I have to resample from further away, and then we'll come in and fill in that last little bit of grass. And then we'll come over here, same thing, Alt, copy from, and we'll work our way up this side. My computer's working much better now. There we go. And then let's also copy from here, and we'll work our way a little bit closer to the house. Say something like that. Now, if I press Control 0, we can see that I've softened that edge, and it really feels like it's part of being cut through. It would be naturally in some kind of a field of grass or something along those lines. So I have that established rather nicely. And then now it's time to start to move on to including a background image. And again, these are steps that have been repetitive for the things that we've been doing. I will show you some new things today, but I at least want to kind of continue going through these options. So let's go ahead and turn off the ground and the wall fill for a second. Oops. And it looks like I accidentally filled this on the lines layer, so that's going to have to exist on the lines layer for now. And let me fill back in that. We'll leave that on for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Creative Commons search. Oh, by the way, I should point out, if you go to Assembly 10.3, everything that I'm doing today has a step-by-step with images. I think there's like 31 steps or something. And it walks you through kind of how to do exactly what I'm doing. So you can reference that in a step-by-step sort of manner. So let me go ahead and find that background image. So I'm going to go on the search.creativecommons.org. And we're going to look for Yosemite. I don't know. Let's do trees. See what comes up. And so, again, this is very much about finding the right image at the right scale, sort of in the right place. So we're going to quickly scroll through and see if we can't find something. I'm looking generally for something with a little bit of a hill on one side. That's important. So again, this is one of the harder parts of doing this kind of collage work, is finding the right image to go with your particular model. So I wasn't really happy with those. We'll try a few more, and then maybe I'll change my search query if I don't like what I'm seeing. Something like this would probably work. I'm going to open a new tab, keep going a little bit just in case I find something that I like better. We're not doing the forest fire. Right? Something like this is nice, but this tree is way too close, so I don't want that. Right? That one's not bad. This one might work. All right, let's take a look at this one. Assuming it's reasonable, I've got a little bit of a hill there. Yeah, this could work. I'm going to go ahead and download the original size. Let me go ahead and show it in my folder and copy it. And I'm going to paste it into my exercise for today. I'll go ahead and paste. And while I'm here, I'm going to, if I don't like that one, I'll use this one, which I know will work. Yeah, that'll work. And we'll download this as well. And we'll copy it. And let's paste it in here. Perfect. So I've got both of those. Now I'll go ahead and press Control- so I can see a little bit more of my scene. And I'll go to File and then Place, and I'm going to bring in the background. And so this is the one that I was going to start with. And I'll hold down Shift and make this a little bit larger. And we have to kind of see, is this going to work? Right? I need for the ground and the horizon to not be too far away from what I'm trying to do here with this hill. So let me go ahead and change this temporarily to be in multiply mode so I can kind of see through and see, is this lining up the way I want? Am I seeing what I want? Is the view low enough? Right? And so something like that might start to feel okay. It looks like I'm losing a little bit of the top, but that's okay. I can crop that off later on. Right? So I'll go ahead and say OK, and that seems reasonable. Let me go ahead and rename this image background. And I'm also going to change it back to being a normal image. And I'm going to move it down directly above my lines layer. Okay? Now I need to actually cut out the parts that are white. So we'll turn it off, and we'll look at my lines layer right here. And I'm going to select everything that's outside of my building. Now, if I had a window that was part of my building looking to beyond, right, I would need to include that as part of this selection. And for the sake of teaching you guys some stuff, I'm actually going to put a window in arbitrarily so you can see what this would look like. In my particular building, the way it's set up, I don't have this window, but I want you guys to be able to see me do it. So I'm going to add this window right now. So I'm going to add a little window, like a strip of windows that's up here at the top of my scene. Something like that. It's a little bit high. Do it again. Actually, let me subtract that and try it one more time. All right, and let me break it up a little bit. I'm going to press Alt to subtract this, and we'll create a few little breaks in this window. It's probably not going to be perfect, but it'll at least show you this as a concept. Okay, so I have those as little windows that have been selected. And now I'll go to my background layer. I can turn it on, and I can go ahead and click on the Add Layer Mask button. And when I do that, we've now clipped out my building, and it represents, right, the building that is solid, and we can start to see the section forming, right? And I've also have all these little windows that I can then look through, right, to see what is beyond. And it's important to recognize that if you have a window that looks to beyond, we have to show that as part of this particular view. So now that I have that, I'd like to distinguish the difference between the foreground or the windows and the background. And so I'm going to go ahead and do an adjustment layer on this background. And so I'll go ahead and go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer. And I'm going to do, let's do a Hue and Saturation adjustment. And I'll go ahead and say OK. There's a variety of strategies for how you do this, but essentially I want to adjust the color of this particular view to be different than the rest of the image. So maybe I'll do it slightly more. Now obviously it's affecting what's going on up here, and I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to fix that in just a second. But I'm concentrating on what's happening in the windows. So it's a little bit more purple in the windows. Okay? So I'll go ahead and close that, but I'm going to create a new layer mask on this layer so that it only applies to the area where these little windows are. So what I'll do is I'm going to delete this all white layer mask. So we'll go ahead and press the delete key, and I'm going to delete that layer mask. And I'm going to create a new layer mask that includes, right, let me use my magic wand. I'll go onto lines. I'll select the background here. Right, then I'm going to say select inverse so that I have just the inside of the building selected. And then I'll go to the hue and saturation layer and click add layer mask. And so what happened is the layer mask is only applying, right, to the windows that are showing up right here, not to the background. Right? I could take it a step further and I could adjust the background independently. So I could once again, and let me press Control-Alt-G so that this is tied, this adjustment is tied only to the background layer. And I could do one more adjustment layer. I could do layer, new adjustment layer. And I could do, let's say, let me do a channel mixer. And I'll say, okay, and again, this is a way of showing you something. Right, I've turned the background into a black and white image. And again, I could go through my presets. We've already done these kinds of things to figure out which is the right view. Okay? And I could have that apply to just the background part of the image. So let me go ahead and select the lines once again. I'll use my magic wand. I'll select the background. I'll come up here to my channel mixer, and I'm going to apply the layer mask. Oops, sorry. I have to delete the existing layer mask. You right-click and say delete layer mask, and then we're going to add the layer mask. And now you can see that the background is in black and white, but the windows are in color. Right? So it's an option. It's something that I could do if I wanted to. In this particular case, I don't think it's the most effective, so I'm going to leave it as a colored image. I think it looks better as colored. But the point is that I can start to control those independent of one another. Okay? So now I'm going to push this a little bit further, and I'm going to start to add some materials to the building itself. So let's go ahead, and the building I have is concrete, so I'm going to find a concrete material that I can use. So I'll go back to my Creative Commons search, and I'm going to type in concrete tiling texture, and we'll see what comes up. Something like this is rather nice. Open that in a new tab. Just want to see if there's anything else. Looks good, or that looks better. Right, one of these might not look too bad. So let me go ahead and see those in a larger format. I like this one. That looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and download this. And I searched for tiling texture because that means that I'll be able to put them together and it'll look like a seamless set of walls. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and we're going to put it on my flash drive into today's folder. There it is. And let me go ahead and go to File and then Place. And I'm going to drop that concrete texture onto my building. So there it is. I think it's a bit large. And I could even change this to be in multiply mode so I can kind of see through. And I think I need to make this a little bit smaller. So again, I'm holding down Shift as I'm adjusting it. And I want these panels. Yeah, that's probably about right. Let's move this up a bit. Like that. And I'll go ahead and commit to it. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy and paste it multiple times. So I'll use the rectangular marquee tool. And as long as I'm on the concrete layer, I can just drag a box around it. Control-C, or edit copy, and then Control-V, or edit paste. We'll drop another one on top of it. And I can get those two to line up. And then I can keep Control-C and Control-V. to get these to line up. There. And we'll work our way across my building. Notice that I deliberately made these tiles large enough so that they would cover all the way across my building as I go through. So there, and there. Oops. There, and one more right there. Okay, so I have all of these put together, but I want all of them to end up being on one layer. So I'll start with the first one, and I'll come up to the last one. And then once they're all selected in blue here, I'll right-click and say Merge Layers. And that'll make one layer, and I'm going to rename this layer to be Concrete Texture. With the Concrete Texture layer active, I need to go ahead and create the mask for it. So let's jump back to my lines drawing, make that the active layer, and then we'll go ahead and create some selections. So obviously this piece, that piece, this interior, that piece as well. And I'm going to leave that selected as well, and let me zoom in and select this one little edge right here. Okay. Now unfortunately that just added the top up here as part of my selection. So I have to do a little bit of modification. I'll hold down Alt with the rectangular marquee tool and deselect that piece that it just selected. There, and hold on a second, I need to get rid of that little piece there as well. Alt to deselect that piece. That. And I need to hold down Shift and add that piece to the selection too. Okay. Now that I have those selected, I can go ahead and go to the Concrete Texture layer, and I can click on the Add Layer Mask, and it will then cut my concrete texture to fit in that part of my building. Okay. I didn't cut out where those little walls were, so let me back up a step there, and let me go and move myself onto let's see here, what's going to be the easiest way of doing it? Maybe the background layer there on the mask, and let me hold down Alt to subtract from, and we'll see if I can subtract from these particular. Yeah, that's going to be a little bit challenging. This is all challenging because I didn't draw the windows to begin with. So let's just do it really quick. I need to subtract these windows. So let me hold down Alt to subtract. And we'll subtract each one of these. And I apologize that you guys have to wait and watch me do this, but such is the nature of things. Okay, so those windows are now selected. I may not have done the best job ever, but they will work. And then once again, I'm going to add the layer mask so that it's cut out. And we can turn that on, and we can see that I now have a concrete texture that's been applied to the inside of the building. Okay? It would be nice, though, if the inside and the outside of the building were slightly different, right? Or at least each of the planes of the building were slightly different so that we could kind of distinguish this as an overall composition. So I may do some adjustment layers on top of this concrete texture to accommodate that. So let me go and do a layer, new adjustment layer, and let's do a levels adjustment. And I'm going to darken up the background just a little bit like that. And again, I want this to apply just to the layer below it, so Control-Alt-G on the layer. So that's applying just to that. And you can see that it darkened it a little bit. And I then need to create a layer mask on that adjustment that would then apply only to, say, the inside of my building. So we'll select the inside of the building. And then we'll click on, let me delete this layer mask, and we'll add a new one. And now you can see that the inside of the building concrete is slightly darker. There it is, slightly darker than the outside. So I'm adjusting it a little bit so that we can see it. Right? I might do the same thing for this particular piece of concrete that's in the outermost, furthest away piece. And so let's do a new layer, new adjustment layer. And I'll do levels again. And this time we'll lighten that particular piece up a little bit. Maybe like that. And so by doing that, I'm starting to create some depth in this image. And again, Control-Alt-G, so it's applying just to the layer. Maybe I need to darken this one just a little bit more so that you guys can start to see that contrast. So I have the way background, I have the middle, I have the interior, right? And then this plane here corresponds to, actually it's supposed to correspond to that plane, I think. So there's some adjustments, but you guys get the idea, okay, for how those come together. So now maybe I want to take this a step further, and I want to add some artificial lighting as part of this particular scene. And so this is something new that we haven't done before. And so what I'll do is I'll create a new layer. I'll move this up. And I'm going to call this layer, let's move it up here. I'm going to call this layer lighting. And let's make sure it's below the wall fill layer. There it is, but above the concrete. And then that layer itself, I'm going to change the blending mode to be something called soft light, which we haven't done before. We'll leave it as soft light. And I'm going to use the basic brush tool coupled with a light that is very kind of a pale yellow. So I'm over here in the yellow spectrum. I'm picking a light that's very pale yellow. I'll say OK. And I want my brush to be very, very soft. So I'm going to change this down to 0. And then on this layer, I'm actually going to paint as if there were little lights coming down. So we'll paint a light there. Now light tends not to be quite this static, right? It tends to go out kind of in a cone. So once I paint the first stripe, and I'm going to go a little bit further so it hits the floor, I'm going to increase the size of my brush and then paint down a little bit more, paint down a little bit more, paint down a little bit more, and paint the bottom. See how it kind of flares out as I'm going down? Okay. Now, the way that I have it done right now, it's probably too strong on the projector. It doesn't look quite as bad on my screen, but I'll make an adjustment for that a little bit later. So let's start again at this point, and we'll go straight down. I'll make my brush a little bit bigger. We'll go straight down. A little bit bigger, straight down. A little bit bigger still, and we'll go straight down. I'll do the same thing again over here. Right? Small stripe straight down, a little bit bigger. Notice that I'm not going as far each time I make it a little bit bigger. There. Okay? And maybe I'll do it one last time somewhere over here against the wall. There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. And so now I have these little spots of light that are shining on the wall. If they're too strong, remember I can adjust the opacity down to the amount that feels like it's enough light so that it is in fact artificial light, but not too much. Right? And you have to decide what that is. But now we have these little lights that are applying as part of the scene as well. Okay? The next piece of the puzzle is really about having a sense of scale as part of this particular drawing. And I'm going to do that by adding some people. And so if you guys remember way back to, I think it was exercise 108 or something like that, remember I had you cut out people? Right? There's always method to my madness. There's a reason that I made you do that in the first place, and that is because now we can go back and use them. So let me go to the resources, and then I'll go to collage images on the course website. And here are the people. Let me go ahead and look for the people. And I can then go in and I can look at a variety of people. And I'm looking for somebody that's in kind of a pose or a look that feels like they belong as part of this particular scene. Obviously, somebody walking a dog inside doesn't really work, right? But one of these others might not be too bad. Let's use her, for example. Right? Now, if I were to use her in the color version, it probably is going to contrast a bit with the overall scene that I'm trying to create. So I'm going to download the black and white version, because I think it'll look a little bit better. And I'm also going to download the gray version, because ultimately the silhouette might be the best choice. So let me go ahead and make this big. And then I'm going to save image as. And look, lo and behold, there's the images from earlier today. Maybe I'll just use those images because I already downloaded them. And let me go ahead and place those into the scene. So I'll go to File and then Place. And I'll go ahead and place this in. Okay, so obviously she's significantly larger than I need her to be. So we need to shrink her down so that she'll fit. So I'll hold down Shift and shrink her in proportion. Now it's important to make sure that you get the height correct. And so you kind of need to know the general scale of your building such that you know where the person's head should fall. Right? If this height here was 12 feet, she would need to be less than half. In my context, this is actually a 16-foot ceiling, so she's going to be significantly less. We're going to be looking at about like that for the scale of my building. Okay? Likewise, I need to move her feet up a little bit, and there she is. Now, she needs to be below the wall fill layer. And this is where I made a mistake, because that piece should have been, it's down here at the bottom, and I should have filled it in. Let me go ahead and fill it on the wall fill layer. Let's place her. Hold on a second. There, and let me go into the wall fill layer, and I should have painted this with black from the beginning. That was my mistake. I was on the wrong layer. Let's paint that in. And I've deliberately set her feet below the floor line so that her feet are no longer in perspective. She looks like she's just standing there, which is the idea. So I faked that a little bit. I could move her up just a touch. Whoops, wrong layer. I could move her up just a touch. And there we go. There she is. Okay? So it's not bad. She shows up okay on the scene, but sometimes the silhouette works better. So let me show you the silhouette as an alternative. So I'll go to File and then Place. And maybe I'll drop the silhouette in instead. And again, the size is going to be very similar, so I'll adjust the height to match. Right, there she is. Move her up. Let's go right there. Get a little taller. There we go. And so instead of having the black and white, I might have the silhouette. Oh, let me commit to it. I might have the silhouette. And it may be a matter of personal preference as to how, which one looks better or the other, and that's part of why I'm trying to show you both so you can decide. The other thing that can happen is maybe the gray doesn't stand out enough. I can change her using an adjustment layer. So let me go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Levels. And again, I'll tie that Control-Alt-G directly to the figure. And with that layers adjustment, I can choose to make her black, right, which she stands out very nicely as black. Or I could do the opposite, and I could make her white, which also makes her stand out. Right? And so it's dependent on what looks right to you in your particular building. The one that I did this morning, white looks significantly better than black. In this one, I kind of think black might look a little bit better. But part of the reason, way back when, that I made you do a middle gray, a 75% gray, is because it's so easy to convert this either into black or into white. If we had the opposite, where we had it as white or we had it as black, it's much harder to change. But in this context, it works pretty well. So let me go ahead and drop another person in. I'll go to File and then Place. And I have a man that's sitting here. We'll go ahead and put him in. I want to shrink him down. right? He's probably going to be a little bit taller, something like that. Now, I think maybe I want him on the outside, so I'm going to go to Edit and then Transform, and I'm going to flip horizontal so that he's looking up at the building, and we'll place him down over here, kind of in the ground, looking up toward the building, something like that, which is part of, again, the rules of composition. Okay? But let's make him black as well. So once more, I'll go up to my layer. Oops. I have to commit to this. Then I'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer. Let me do a Levels adjustment. And again, I'll tie that Levels adjustment, Control-Alt-G, directly to the man that's in gray. And then I can adjust that person to be in black as well. Right? And in this context, the black doesn't show up quite as well because of the darkness of the shadows there. Right? So again, this may be an option to do something different. Or maybe I'll move him. Oops, let me be on him. Maybe I'll move him over more in front of the tree or something like that where he might show up a little bit better. Okay? So the point is I put those two people in. Let me press Control-0. And then I'll go ahead and turn on the rest of the layers that I have turned off, which include my X-ray. Right? Oh, I didn't go through the shadows. I need to make a quick adjustment to the shadows. So in the context of the shadows, the shadow cast on the outside of the building mattered. The shadows on the inside of the building didn't. So let me make sure that I'm on the shadows layer. I'm going to rasterize that layer. So I'll right-click and say Rasterize Layer so that I can actually work on it. And then I'll go ahead and I'll select everything on the inside of the building here. And as long as I'm on the shadows layer, I can just press the Delete key, and the shadows are going to go away as part of the interior. The shadow in here exists because it is cast, but the shadow where the lights were doesn't. So let me press Control+ to zoom in here. And I'm going to make a selection over the top of this particular piece. And then I'm going to sample this color of gray. And remember, if I turned everything else off, this might make more sense. Let me turn everything off so that I have just the shadow selected. Essentially, what I'm going to do is sample this color of gray and then paint that color of gray in that particular region. Looks like I have a little bit more to paint. And we'll go ahead and paint that piece as well. And now when I come back and I start to turn everything on, there we are, and there we are. Let me press Control-0. Okay. Oops, I didn't mean to turn on that the gray there. There we are with my people. Looks like I actually am still unhappy with the person. I was zoomed in too far. Let me take him. And again, this is where it would be helpful to have my people labeled a little bit better. And let's move him a little bit further away as part of this composition. We'll set him down over maybe in that region there. All right. And so now I have a pretty darn good setup of what this section looks like. The one last thing that I can choose to do is I can choose to fade the top of this image so that it would blend into white. And I can do that by going to the background layer here. And I'm going to first go to the lines layer and select only the background using the magic wand tool, which is right there. I'll select that. Then I'm going to click to be on the layer mask itself. And then I'll use the gradient tool from black to white to create a little gradient up here at the top, which is then going to fade the top away. Let me fade it from here down so that it fades to white like that. And so this can be a useful tool so that this blends out and isn't a really strong, sharp edge at the top of the page, depending on how you have your particular poster laid out. Maybe we need to transition it from further away. Right, so maybe we'll go, oops, that was wrong. Right, maybe I'll go back with that gradient tool and I'll go even deeper. Something like that, so it fades even more. Right, it's dependent on what feels right in your particular circumstance. Okay, so now that I'm done, I'll go ahead and go to File, Save for Web. And this is what I'm going to post at the end of class for today. So I know it's a lot to take in, but I added just a few more steps to what we've been doing. I added the people. I did a little bit more with the lighting. Next class, next week, we're going to do the perspective view. Remember that 3 of the 4 SketchUp collages are going to be due a week from today as your assignment 106. So you're going to pick 3 of, either an elevation, a plan, a section, and or a perspective. So you might do a perspective, a section, and a plan. You might do an elevation, a section, and a perspective. The point is, it's 3 of those 4. Does that make sense? As part of your assignment 106. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn you loose to work. If you have any questions, just let me know, and I'm happy to come and help you.